with regards to SCS, Sincere Community Services, who are here to help new Muslims and existing Muslims collaborate and work together, giving new information and awareness. I'd like to introduce my guest today and go straight into the topic. With us tonight, Dr. Wendy, all the way from the United States. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Wendy Ibrahim, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, walaikum salam. Thanks for having me.
Being here today. We also have our scholar, Sayyid Rezavi. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid.
Assalamu alaikum, thank you for hosting.
You're welcome. We have another important topic for tonight, and that is, how can new Muslims have a proper and dignified marriage? That is a question that most people are quite curious as to why we've chosen this, but I personally have had many issues where women do come, especially as reverts, wanting to enter into a relationship, and they do have a lot of issues, and that can come from many angles. So firstly, Sayyid, before I come to you, Dr. Wendy, I just want to, how would you define and give an example of a proper dignified marriage?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Marriage is one of the sacred institutions in Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our creator, instructed us to be married because we have been created as social beings. And one of the requirements of social beings is to live together, and living together also means that we should try to raise a healthy future generation for the community and for the ummah. So when we want to select our future spouse, we have to be very careful what we are looking for. According to Islamic teachings, if we go for wealth, we will be stuck only in wealth. If we go for the looks, we will be stuck in looks. If we go for the position, we will only be stuck in the position. What we need to do really is try to find, first of all, if we are equal in understanding each other, and there is a mutual interest and mutual understanding between the couple, and then move forward with the intention of raising the future generation. So we should not just go for these side issues. We should also look for the iman and faith of our future partner if we want to raise a proper Muslim family. I usually say that if you look at the young couple's reasons for selecting each other, you can decide what type of future generation they would be presenting to the humanity. Although this is not a hard and fast written rule, we see examples of some people being brought up in totally a non-Muslim, unethical environment, and they start discovering Islam and faith and religion, and they become Muslim, like many converts. I mean, they were not raised and brought up in Muslim families, and they chose to be Muslim. And contrary to this, we also see examples of Muslim families who, even I know scholars' families who were scholars from both sides, and they tried to bring up the children, and the children ended up becoming infidels and losing the faith. Although the rate of conversion to Islam is far more greater than the rate of people who may be leaving faith. So, and this is due to the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-Islamu ya'lu wa la yu'la alayh, that Islam or submission to the will of God, which exists in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, because followers of all these divine faiths have submitted their will to the will of God. So, if the submission to the will of God is there, there is a possibility of raising a better future generation.
Thank you so much. You raised many issues, Sayed. I want to come to you, Dr. Wendy. What do you find is the main challenges when new Muslims enter into the religion of Islam that they find, whether it's from a woman's perspective or from a male's perspective?
I would love to reflect on something that the Sheikh has said. As I was listening to him, I was thinking about a verse of the Quran that says that we, men and women, we are garments to one another. And as I shared with you as we were preparing for this show, I have now been in a 23-year marriage and have had many experiences of having to have mutual support for one another. And I do a lot of work in the world with non-Muslims, and there are a lot of perceptions about what Muslim marriage and relationships are like, and perhaps the type of person I am because I've chosen to be in a Muslim marriage. And I think that there's a real beauty in the way that we in Islam get to express our marriage and as a practice of our faith and our ability to support one another through the hard times and through the good times. And I really like what you were saying, Sheikh, about not just looking for the outward signs of success. There's a real partnership that we can have with each other that helps enhance our deen, enhance our faith, get us closer to God. And it's certainly not always easy, but it's always worth it if you're doing this loving relationship for the sake of Allah and as part of your completion of your faith.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing was, as you both were speaking, is that it's amazing to have the knowledge, but when you're first coming in, do you think that there is enough sort of support around new Muslims when it comes to their faith, their deen? And sometimes I know personally that there are a lot of new Muslims, especially women, that come into the faith quite vulnerable, and the first thing they want is a marriage. But unfortunately, they fall into a trap of falling for the wrong types. What he has, even if they're looking for someone who is so-called religious and come off that sort of background, doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to follow through or in suit for the right sort of relationship. So should there be steps that a new Muslim should take in order for them to safeguard themselves when they are going to be faced with someone approaching them, for example? Sayed, I'd like to come to you on that first, please. And I do apologize for the internet connection tonight. Inshallah, it will be better, but hopefully you can hear me regardless. Sayed, what's your thoughts on that? How should we safeguard ourselves, especially as Muslim women, when we are being approached for marriage? What are the sort of red flags we need to look out for? And it really doesn't matter what is the background. There be, even like you said, from a scholar background or anything, there are procedures in place which I think women need to be more aware of so that they do not become sort of victim to any sort of circumstance. I can't hear you. Could you start again, Sayed? Sorry, we could not hear you.
Yeah, according to Islamic teachings, when the marriage begins, marriage is a kind of agreement between opposite sex couple to live together. And when they want to start their relationship, both parties are allowed to put the conditions before the marriage takes place. If those conditions are not placed before the marriage, then any condition that may be agreed upon later on is not legally binding. It has a value of mutual respect, and that's it. So if the sisters want themselves to be protected and their rights to be protected, they should think of all those conditions that they would like to put at the beginning of marriage, and they should not be shy of mentioning that. And the brothers should not feel offended. Unfortunately, this is where the culture comes in. And for example, I've been in a wedding ceremony. I usually do the marriage certificates with absolutely equal rights for the couple. And when I start mentioning the women's right, even the members or elders of the family of the bride feel offended, and they tell me, Maulana or Imam or Sheikh, why you are mentioning divorce at the time of marriage? I said, well, they are going to uh, join in an agreement which is going to be legally binding, and they want to live together forever. So if they want to live together forever, they need to understand each other's rights. And this is what we are lacking, unfortunately, in the centers. Only there are some Muslim countries, quite surprisingly, those Muslim countries who are practicing the education of rules and regulations of marriage and the side effects of marriage and all the problems that marriage may bring, and all the benefits that marriage may bring into your life, are the non-Arab countries. I mean, in Arab countries, the rule is just to impose what the male believe, and they even hide the responsibilities and duties of and the rights of women. And fortunately now, in like in Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia, and some parts of Middle East, non-Arab Middle East, this practice is becoming a common practice, that ladies are allowed to express their understanding of marriage and what they are expecting. For example, in Islam, men are considered to be responsible for the family unit. Responsibility does not mean that they are boss. Of course, requirement of a social being is that we need a leader. So even the smallest unit of our society, which is a family, also requires leader. But being a leader does not mean that you have become a boss. You being a leader means you are responsible, and you will be held responsible if you mistreat and do not think carefully of your family and the smallest unit of the society. So this is what we need to promote within our society and within our youngsters. Before they get married, they should be educated uh, from various different points of view. They should be taught the fiqhi masail, the jurisprudence of marriage. They should be taught legal rights of marriage. They should be taught psychological benefits of marriage, and also sexual issues should be explicitly taught and discussed and explained to the couple who are intending to get married. And finally, the financial problems after marriage should also be discussed and uh, mentioned before the marriage takes place. Then we can, if we make this as a norm, inshallah, the future generation will be raised up properly.
Thank you. That was very insightful, and I'm glad you raised that, because I think a lot of women especially feel that they cannot speak up, and they do have rights in Islam, and it's really important that we have that awareness, especially as new Muslims. Maybe a lot of the time they kind of feel that they have to just accept what is there, when actually they do have a lot more with regards to marriage, and they can have a voice and express it. I want to take a step back before even entering marriage, before you meeting your spouse. When people approach you for marriage, how do you know that they are actually serious for marriage? Because a lot of people now, they go about with the so-called halal dating. And I know, especially in my experience, when a lot of women come to me complaining, especially with reverts, that they have, somebody who is probably even a public figure or a speaker or one, they are actually being lured in to a relationship to say, preparing yourself and myself for marriage, but let's go out, let's date, let's talk, let's get to know each other, even if it's in a halal or terrain. And it's not necessarily there. Do you not think that we should have more sort of even education about some of the boundaries that we need to, especially when it comes to us accepting people in our space, especially before marriage, and they can't just say it by name. A lot of people, new Muslims have their families, their parents, or a wali. So what are your thoughts on that, Dr. Wendy? Do you feel that there is something that needs to be done a little bit more severe for the young ladies who are trying to look for a partner?
Well, I have a daughter who, I'm American, my husband is Egyptian, and my daughter has turned 18, and she has let us know that she is ready to consider marriage and look at that. She's getting ready for college. And I'm really aware that there aren't a lot of resources available for us to figure out how to navigate the Western ideals of what relationships are, and then what we want for our daughters as they're moving into Islamic relationships and Islamic marriages. And I find that a real challenge. I was looking for books or articles. I would love to see a whole body of work come about how we navigate modern Western societal expectations around relationships and marriage, and how we can then guide our daughters and the other young women in our community. One of the things I love about Islam is that it gives us this requirement consistently throughout the Quran to consider and learn and think. And there's an autonomy that isn't required to have a gender. Like, the knowing and understanding Islam isn't only because you're male. Women get to learn and get to know and are encouraged to do so. And so if I would really love to see we as women in our community providing more resources and support for young women who are coming up through Islam, and then also people who are converting to Islam and looking to have marriages that are halal and the way that we want to do it in a proper way. And it looks like you're frozen up. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that, Sheikh?
Yes, I agree with you that we need to educate our women, especially, especially as a minority living in a non-Muslim world. We have a lot of such issues. Recently, I was in Venezuela. Around 15 to 16 reverts or convert ladies came to me and said that they have been Muslim for 15 years and they are single, not married. So what is the problem? What is the solution for this? So yes, our Muslim
Absolutely.
ladies,
I really do apologize again for everyone that's watching with the actual visual as well as some of the sound. We have Dr. Wendy here in the United States, and I also have some issues with but can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can
yes,
hear you. One issue that I have seen in my community that concerns me is sometimes males in positions of authority, and Fahima mentioned that, will sometimes take advantage of the lack of knowledge of women coming to Islam. And there's a sort of spiritual abuse that sometimes can happen when men will say to
Yes,
women, I know all the rules.
Today.
Oops.
Yeah, carry on, sister.
Okay, so just being concerned that women are sometimes kept from, I've seen women kept from the mosque, discouraged from reading the Quran, discouraged from kind of deciphering and getting knowledge and finding support from other women. And I would really like to see all of us as an ummah discouraging that kind of what can really be religious abuse, taking women into the Muslim faith and then not allowing them to have the full experience of the faith and using it to keep women kind of in a stereotypical in their place that feels almost more like a Western ideal than what is a true and pure Islamic ideal to me.
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, this is due to lack of education.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I was saying it is due to lack of education within our community, and
Can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, you're cutting up, both of you, for a while, but that's fine. We will still continue. We have a lot to go through, and inshallah, even if I'm frozen, you can actually hear me, because now you both are frozen. It's just one of those days where, unfortunately, we do have some really bad technical issues, which doesn't normally happen, so I do apologize. But inshallah, you do have a gist of what's happening, is that we do have an issue where when new Muslims are entering and for marriages, it is really important that we take extra care, extra sort of like awareness that we don't take
Time is that she cannot get married without the permission and
Did you hear me
consent of
say
the
it?
yes, without the consent of an elder, and that elder has to be father or grandfather. If father and grandfather also are in agreement,
Wendy, can you hear me?
Yes.
and
Can you
then
hear
the
me say
marriage
it?
can take. Yes, I can. We can.
Daughter to have the learn and go continue with her education, be able to access her faith and really practice her faith from her heart. And I also want to feel like it's a person that when it comes to her time to be a mother, which is a really sacred role, that she has the support that she needs so that she has all of her basic needs met so that she can tend to being a mom. And that kind of surprises me that has come out for me as a highest priority, because before I came to Islam, I would have defined myself as very, very feminist, and I still do, but it looks a lot different. And I feel so blessed that I had chosen a partner that allowed me to take those 2 years, that is sunnah, to breastfeed my children. And I was able to do that for 4 consecutive years because I had 2 kids back to back. And that didn't mean that I was denied my right to my education. I wasn't denied my right to work. I wasn't denied my right, all of those things. But when I was in the most important days and moments of being a mother and parenting my children, I had a spouse that was able to support me And I am so grateful for that, and I really hope and pray that my daughters get that same kind of love and attention with someone who has responsibility and care to tend to them and then my future grandchildren.
Inshallah. No, good luck with that. But Sayed, do you think that a lot of new Muslims are kind of like under the illusion that sometimes they put certain people on a pedestal, or they look at certain people in a particular way, which actually can deter them from making these right choices like you described? Yes, they have to be religious. Yes, they have to be proper. They have to be their equal. How do you know that, though? What are the real examples that Muslim women need to do in order to do that? So if a guy approaches a girl wanting marriage and say, what would be the first thing that the girl needs to say? Like, I find it that I can give this kind of advice, but I want you to say it, because a lot of women lost translation with the way in which they have to accept sin and also protect themselves. Like, do they first off say, what is your intention? Or am I speaking to your family as well? Am I speaking to you alone? Is that okay? These are the real things that we are not practical about. So girls are getting confused to say, at the end of the day, we're trying to get to know each other. Is it okay for so-called halal dating? Let's be real about the strict rules. It is there for their protection. But it seems to be, especially in this kind of normal world, especially now with the online dating and just people free talking, it kind of like goes really into where it actually does become quite detrimental. And I'm only because there's been more and more issues recently where girls have been disappointed, they're getting hurt. It's really damaging not just their current relationship if they're actually entering into it, but if it doesn't work out, into their future relationships. And it makes a huge difference, and people don't realize the impact and the effect if they are going to play and mess around with a person who has maybe not much of knowledge or information about the process of getting to know somebody in a halal way, which is going to protect them.
Well, I mean, the halal way is that, there is no restriction to know each other. There is no, let me give you an example. I wouldn't name the person, but explain how it happened. There used to be a gathering that used to take place at one of the mosques and centers quite regularly every week, and a young brother and a young sister used to come and take part in the lecture and sessions. So there was a brother who liked a sister, and he very politely went to this sister and said, "Look, sister, I like you, and I would like to come and propose to you. If you speak to your elders and get the permission, I will bring my elders and we will discuss how to proceed." And this is what happened. She went and talked to her parents, and her parents gave permission for his elders to come and approach. And they went forward and discussed everything and understood. They gave them a period of talking under supervision, and they went out as a family while the young future couple were discussing their future in presence, or if not too closely, but they were being monitored under the supervision of the family members, and they discussed everything, and finally they got agreed. They came to an agreement, and marriage took place, and alhamdulillah, they're happily married. So this is one of the ways that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to consider mosques as the place of solving all the problems. So the brothers and sisters should strengthen their connection to the mosques, and the mosques should not be only used for rushing in for prayers and leaving the mosque after prayers. Mosques should be places where even accommodation and places for surgeries of psychotherapists, physical, medical doctors and physicians, and even sports activities and education and tutorial. All these things should take place at the mosque, so people come to know each other as a community, so they can develop trust in each other to propose and move on.
One of the things that I've really liked about Islam is the
That is
potential
really
for that.
lovely, and I love the fact that you said that. It's really important that we understand. So go ahead, Wendy, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I think the capacity that we have to build community with each other and get to know each other's families, coming from a very Western upbringing and not really understanding much about the Islamic world until I was in my early 30s, it's I think a lot of times people will think about this sort of cooperation that happens between families as odd. I think it's more common in the West to just go off, find someone, present them to your family. But what we can do in our religious institutions, we can get to know each other as families, and we can start to look for people who might be suitable for each other, families that might be suitable to walk through life together, and to meet, I think, in a beautiful situation like an Islamic school or at a lesson at a mosque or during Ramadan, or different things like that. That opportunity to be able to further our community by joining families together, I think, is just a really beautiful thing.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think it's really that you said that, because, and you, Wendy, that we need to use our centers also for getting to know one another in the right way. But what is your thoughts on people now, and especially with the pandemic, that people are meeting and they are talking online, and there's still maybe issues about boundaries? What are the boundaries that come? People kind of forget that just because they're talking online, that certain rules don't apply. What are the rules? Firstly, I'll come to you, Said, on online dating, online meeting. Do you think that we should have our parents and someone still knowing? It's quite difficult for people to say that they're talking online and things like that. What's your thoughts on the whole idea?
Are you asking me, or are you asking Syed?
It's to say it, yes, if you can hear me. With the rules on online dating.
Well, I hate the word dating. Knowing each other online is okay as long as it is within Islamic limits. For example, nowadays, what I have noticed that in some cultures, hijab belongs to the street, and online is not considered as a street. And the girls continue to talk to strangers from home without hijab from inside the house, which is wrong. They should, when they go online, they should observe the full restrictions of hijab and piety and all these restrictions online as well. I mean, they should not flirt in the way that is common in the Western society. They should respect each other's boundaries, and the brothers should not request the ladies or the girl to remove the hijab, and the brothers also should restrain themselves from asking abnormal questions that can ask from a lady who is not mahram yet.
Yes, no, definitely. I think the boundaries are really, really important, and to abide by the rules, even when you're online. And yes, I say the word dating, but knowing that that's just the terminology that is used by a lot of the generation today, but it's not actually something that we do practice as Muslims. There is no such thing as dating. There's about getting to know each other again with the actual set guidelines. Wendy, I do apologize again for the technical issues, but you have raised a lot of points, and we have heard so much from the Saint as well. We've only got 5 minutes left. What would be your takeaway for young Muslim men and women trying to find that proper, dignified marriage? And what more do you think that we need to do as well, whether it's leaders, parents, community members, to give a bit of support so that they have more solutions to move forward, to give some better sort of opportunities so that we can have, marriages in the right way?
One of the things that came to me in listening to this last piece that we've been talking about is really making sure that you're talking to someone who has the same intention as you. So whether you're using the term dating or courtship or whatever, getting to know each other, that it needs to be clear with both parties that the intention is that you're getting to know each other for the sake to see whether or not marriage is a good fit for you. And I feel like having that intention and setting some boundaries, we talked about sort of the marriage contract and setting some expectations. I think in this time, when you're talking about getting married, you have to make sure that one, the person that you're talking to also has that same intention, because if they don't have that same intention, then the conversation is going to look different and get into a different direction. If someone is honorably meeting someone with the intention of getting married, they're not going to ask for inappropriate things or ask to take off a job. Those things are just sort of agreed upon. So if I were to give advice to someone who's looking at trying to find an Islamically proper marriage, I would say that first piece, like what are the intentions? Are your intentions the same? And then who is your support team going to be as you're making your decision, you're getting closer? When are you going to involve family early on, hopefully? What scholars in your area are you going to include? Who can you sit down with for an online meeting to help you do some sort of pre-marriage counseling? Those would be all things that I would recommend.
I would agree with the Islamic courtship rather than Islamic dating.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's what we call it.
Definitely. Well, we're all in agreement there, and it's been absolutely a pleasure to hear you. And I think it's really important. My takeaway is that we do need to have the right intentions set out from the beginning. And inshallah, we just pray and wish that majority of people that are coming in, especially as new Muslims, take more sort of precautions and education and seek the advice and support from people around them so that they can have these kinds of marriages in the best way possible. Again, I want to thank both of you for being here tonight. Thank you, Wendy. Salaam alaikum. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you. Salaam alaikum, Sayyid. I do apologize again for the internet and technical issues. Inshallah, we will get that resolved before our next episode. But I hope that you did have some tips and takeaways as I did tonight. And we will see you in the next episode next week. Take care. Have a lovely evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.